Gail Lee, I'm Sustainability Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability at UC San Francisco. And then Dr. Ariane Teherani, am I pronouncing that correctly? Well, thank you so much. Who's a professor of medicine, and she's also the founding co-director at the University of California for the Center for Climate Health and Equity. She does a lot with quality improvement and education with the Center for Faculty Educators at the UCSF School of Medicine. And so I'm just thrilled that you're both here to talk to us more about climate health, equity, and the UCSF carbon neutral plan. I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. Thank you all so much.
Okay, great. So I just want to be sure you can hear me because I have some audio difficulties. I have to turn my volume down so I can't hear myself. Okay, so can you stop sharing and I can share my screen?
Let me stop sharing. Hold on 1 second.
Thank you. And let me turn this. Okay. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, turn this down. So thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here at this speaking to pediatrics rounds at SFGH. I worked there years and years ago as a dietitian in the intensive care units. So happy to be back. So my name is Gail Lee. I'm the director of sustainability for both UCSF campus and health. And I've been working in this area for more than 10 years, since 2010. And so first of all, I think this is clear probably to all of you that the health professionals have really taken action on climate change, speaking to our representatives and making it clear that climate change is probably the most consequential impact on public health. So this is clearly something that UCSF really has embraced, especially in the last few years where it's become so apparent and when we're starting to see the impacts of climate change on our communities. So let me just back up and share what the UC Sustainable Practices Policy has established as our goal is carbon neutrality of scopes 1 and 2 by 2025. And scope 1 is direct on-site and off-site, including fleet, carbon emissions from our combustion of natural gas, our fleet fuel, release of refrigerants, and anesthesia gases. And then scope 2 are the emissions from purchase electricity. And we actually purchase 5 different sources of electricity in San Francisco. So that's what we're mainly focusing on. But there's also a second practices policy that we achieve carbon neutrality for scopes 1, 2, and 3 combined by 2050. And the scope 3 is really one of the harder ones for us to shift because it's really not in our control. It's focusing on faculty, staff, and student commuting and institutionally funded air travel and even car rental and car travel. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg for scope 3. It actually includes much more than that, but that is what we're counting right now for our numbers. And then lastly, that we reduce our energy intensity by 2% each year. That means we measure all of our energy, electricity, natural gas, divided by our square footage. And that needs to be reduced by 2% a year. So this is a snapshot in 2021 of our carbon emissions from all UCSF owned properties. This is kind of our scope of properties that we can control, that are properties that we own. And you can see clearly 50% is cogeneration. That means we're actually from our power plant at Parnassus, we are burning natural gas to boil water, to create steam, to turn a turbine, to create electricity. And then that electricity feeds all of Parnassus. The steam that's generated also is used to heat our buildings, so it's pretty efficient. We don't really waste much energy. But you can see too, natural gas from other buildings, Mission Bay and Mount Zion in particular, other buildings that we own, we still burn natural gas to heat those buildings and to heat water. And then the third piece, the third pie is really our commute. And it was actually higher in 2021 because of COVID and people's reluctance to use public transit. And we're hoping we can drive that down as more people start to use public transit and feel more comfortable using it. But then you can see all the other sources of electricity, of diesel for shuttles and fleet, refrigerant leaks, and anesthesia gases that we use in surgery. Excuse me. And then also for diesel for our backup generators, because we do have to run those and test them in every building at least once a year. And this gives you a really good idea of our emissions from our peak in 2017. This is when we had the largest square footage after the construction of Mission Bay Hospital, and then it became fully occupied in fiscal year 16-17. And this was our highest level of emissions. And since then, we're continuing to drive it down more and more. You can see that the largest piece of this is the power plant at Parnassus. And then second to that is natural gas. Third to that is commute. But you can see clearly air travel, other electricity, shuttles and fleets, anesthesia, refrigerants, and backup generators are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So we're really looking at what 3 areas we really need to focus on, which is natural gas at Parnassus, natural gas, other buildings, and the commute. But we do have a strategy, and this has been in effect for quite some time, is clean power. So we are purchasing power from San Francisco Clean Power, Peninsula Clean Power at our Oyster Point facility. SFPUC is providing hydropower to us, and that will be hooked up pretty soon at the Block 34, which is the Mission Bay Surgery Center and Clinic, and the adjacent garage. It will be connected to San Francisco PUC, which is 100% hydropower. Then there's UC Clean Power, which is a wholesale power company that the UC system actually created, bought renewable power, created solar farms in the Central Valley, and that feeds most of Mission Bay, Mount Zion, Laurel Heights, and MCB. And then the fifth one is WAPA, which is energy that comes from the Western Area Power Authority from the Columbia River Gorge. We purchased some of that just through an agreement with the UC system that covers a small percentage of our electricity. And then PG&E. PG&E is the balance. PG&E, out of all of the clean electricity sources, sometimes is not 100% clean. And that's because when there are power, what do you call it, PSPS time or threats to rolling blackouts, PG&E, in order to avoid that, they will actually turn up their peaker plants, which burn natural gas. And that 2% of it comes from PG&E. But beyond that, if PG&E gave us 100% clean power, we would be actually 100% clean. So our second strategy is to build fossil-free and energy-efficient buildings. So I don't know if you're aware, but we actually do have 2 all-electric buildings right now. The Tidelands, which is a student housing in Mission Bay, and then the Block 34 Surgery Center at Mission Bay and the adjacent garage. It will be all electric. The Parnassus Research Administration Building that's being designed right now, we're doing everything we can to make sure that that's all electric. And then the new hospital at Parnassus, we're really struggling to see what we can do to make it a cost-efficient and cost-effective to build that hospital with all electric. So that's the challenge there, but we are definitely working on it and we're pushing on that as much as we can. We're also doing solar thermal hot water, which is the first time we've done it at UCSF at the Block 34 Surgery Center. And then if we look at solar photovoltaics, we have them on many of our buildings, ZSFG Research Building, Genentech Hall, Oyster Point, Mission Hall, the 3rd Street Garage, and the hospital parking garage, the Gateway Building at Mission Bay, and Aldea Community Center, and Fresno. So we're doing quite a bit of work there. Induction stoves are something too that, in kitchens, people rely on gas, but the new hospital is committed to having induction stoves, and Tidelands already has them in each individual unit. And then we're looking at global warming refrigerants, which is something that we use for heating, cooling, air conditioning. And so for PCMB at Mission Bay, we actually chose air conditioning system that has no or low global warming impacts of the refrigerants. And then into the future, we're looking at other ways to chill water without the use of refrigerants. And then lastly, nitrous oxide, which we use in the hospital. We have decided that from a research that was done here at UCSF, that we were losing 98%, I believe, pretty high, a really high percentage of nitrous oxide in the infrastructure in our buildings. And so we've decided to eliminate the plumbing of that at Moffitt Long and in the new construction of the hospital, so that we'll only provide it through cylinders, and that way we can control the use of it and the prevention of leaks. So those are 3 areas. And then the Mission Bay Surgery Center also is being built without plumbing, so they'll be using cylinders. And the last strategy is biogas. So what UC has done is captured methane gas from some landfills through contracts. And these landfills exist out of California. They are landfills that previously were not collecting any of the methane gas that was leaking from the landfill and the dairy. And they put the natural gas into the pipeline nearby their location. And UCSF gets credit for that, for reducing the carbon emissions. And we benefit by dividing, the total amount that's generated by the 10 campuses, and we will get that part of the credit. So UCSF is committed to purchasing 40% of our natural gas as biogas from UC, starting 2025, and we need to meet that net carbon neutrality goal. 20% of it will be starting available in 2025. And then another last-ditch strategy, so we're calling it carbon offsets. It's defined as one offset is a certificate of activity that reduces our carbon emissions by 1 metric ton. But carbon offsets have been criticized for being a shortcut. In addition to biogas, both of them really are seen as really market-based strategies and not necessarily true emissions reductions, which is what we're striving to do. However, UCOP developed a list of high quality carbon offsets should we need to purchase them, so that they will be more reliable and more additional, in that it will be as close as it can be to actual reduction. And we've already looked at some things like ozone depleting substances, actual destruction of ozone depleting substances, such as refrigerants, the methane capture, like we've been doing, solar clean cook stoves, and CO2 absorbing concrete. So those are some of the ideas that we're focusing on. But our overarching principles are really that carbon offsets and biogas to get to net zero is not the finish line. We are truly looking at decarbonizing our campuses as much as possible. And we will continue to focus on deep energy efficiency, because the less energy we use, the less energy we need to provide. And because UCSF has more than doubled its square footage since 1990, it's pretty remarkable that we have met the UC interim goal, which is to get back to 1990 level emissions by 2020, which we did in 2020, we did in 2021. And then we want to continue to invest in decarbonization efforts and efficiency efforts as a priority over the purchasing of offsets or biogas. So the outcomes, just so you can see, in 2020 and 2021, we more than doubled our square footage in the past 30 years, but our emissions are still actually below what it was 30 years ago. And this has been really a concerted effort, and kudos to our facilities staff, who have really been working hard in the past 20 years on being more energy efficient and conserving energy as much as possible. In 2020, our emissions dropped below 1990 levels by 2% for all scopes 1, 2, and 3. And in 2021, it was reduced further by 3% for all scopes 1, 2, and 3. It's really remarkable, but we know we're adding more and more square footage, the new hospital, our research buildings, the surgery center. When all that gets added into it, we are going to be looking at potentially having to buy offsets. We hope we won't, but it's going to rely a lot on the energy demand at Parnassus and the natural gas that we use in the outer buildings and our commute emissions. We thought that Slightly lower building occupancy levels helped contain those emissions in 2020. Due to COVID, we did have curtailment of air travel in 2020 and 2021, so that helped lower our emissions. But commute actually went up a little bit, mainly because of people not using public transit or not using alternative transportation. So these are areas that we're still concerned about. So the forecast for the next 3-4 years is that we don't expect to stay below 1990 levels. In 2021, we actually added 1 million square footage, and it was remarkable that we were able to keep our emissions low. But new construction's going on, and we're going to be focusing on zero carbon operations, but there's no guarantee that, when business goes back to usual, that we won't exceed our limits in our emissions. Because of higher occupancy levels, people coming back to the campuses and our buildings, we see that business travel will probably rebound, even though there's been a concerted effort and a lot of discussion amongst faculty about what can be done to alleviate that. I don't know if many of you have heard a lot about some work with, I think Ariane will talk a bit about it, so I'll let her mention that. But we also are looking at remote work and hybrid work to keep our commute emissions down. That's been working actually fairly well, but there is a focus really toward moving people back to campus. And then public transit also is a challenge. But we are definitely looking at new all-electric buildings. The technology is getting better and better. There's a technology called heat recovery chillers that will actually take heat, convert it to pull the heat out and cause some cooling to happen. And it's a very energy efficient system, but it's definitely something that's the technology we're going to be using in all these buildings. Point source steam for sterilization, zero emissions refrigerants, solar thermal hot water will be used at the Mission Bay Surgery Center. Energy Star appliances and equipment, it makes a huge difference. It's very, very important that we all focus on that. Low global warming potential refrigerants for cooling, and then anesthesia gases. And also renovation projects. So this is another project in Burlingame on California Drive that we are actually looking to ensure that this building uses low temperature hot water instead of steam. Better controls in the building so that areas that are not using electricity will be turned down or turned off. Heat pumps for hot water, and energy efficiency ventilation, which is generally one of the higher energy demands because it's just running motors, constantly moving air out of a building. So the forecast for 2025 and beyond is really the focus is on the Parnassus Central Plant. This is where we are using natural gas for the bulk of what we're doing. And we have multiple teams now working on an electrification study, looking at decarbonization in other areas, and how do we replace natural gas, hot water heaters and boilers for electric. So that's been the big challenge. So what can you do to help? And this is what I get this question all the time. Again, emphasize Energy Star appliances, electronics, computers, monitors. You may not know this, but touchscreen monitors, especially the large ones, have to stay on all the time because it's waiting to feel the touch. And that way it can use a lot of energy, I think. So that's definitely something to consider. Replacement of ultra low temperature freezers and any other kind of freezers. We have Energy Star models all available, and we're offering rebates for ultra low temperature freezers, which use as much energy as a household or more. So what else? Electric transportation. We do have electric charging stations in every garage and in parking lots. So we can use that, or public transit. Virtual meetings and conferences, timers on equipment and lights. We give away free timers if there's areas where you think it could be helpful. That's an opportunity. We're converting where we can from natural gas to electric. It does take more electricity, it's more costly. So we're looking at other ways and other technologies to make that shift. If you're working on a construction project of any kind, ask for a decarbonization review. of that project. And there could be ways that we can reduce carbon through those efforts. Report any energy waste if you see this happening anywhere across campus. Let us know. We can work on reducing that. And advocate for strong climate action, just as the health professionals call to action. Our representatives need to hear from health professionals. So the more you can raise your voice, the more demand we can see for stronger action. And then also get certified. We offer a certification, sustainability certification for labs, offices, clinics, units, events. We have all that on our website. You can contact me at gail.lee@ucsf.edu. And we can do a run through and get your work area certified. So I think that's it. I don't know if we want to take questions at the end, or do we want to do that? Can we do that now? Anybody?
Hi, I have a question. I didn't hear a lot of about green space, and I've always heard that that's something that's very helpful with all of those things. Is that on the plan?
Can you say that again? Green space?
Like more trees, like rooftop gardens, plants in the hospital, that sort of thing?
Yes. We're definitely thinking about how we can incorporate more greenery in our work environment in the hospital. At Mission Bay Hospital, they do have gardens and terraces, and that's been really helpful. So we are looking at doing that. It's a good way to capture rainwater as well. So definitely in consideration in all of our plans.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, this is a resident. I'm just wondering, understanding the water, land use, and methane impact of both meat and dairy, how are we working towards incorporating more plant-based foods into our cafeterias, especially at the general?
Oh, that's a good question, because we don't control the food at the county hospital, but it's definitely something you can raise attention to, and I think I'd be very happy to work with them strategies on how to do that. So we could, they could reach out to me, and you can offer my name as a resource, and we'd be happy to work with them. Yeah, because we're doing that at all of our hospital kitchens at UCSF, and we're definitely looking to move away from meats and animal proteins and more grains and more produce.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure. Hello.
Alma, you might have gone back on mute.
Via email. So if you have any other questions that you think about after this today,
I'm
or
sorry.
you can ask me later. Ariane gets her questions.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I can hear you now.
Too many buttons on my phone. I'm curious how your group is trying or going to try to bring in the new UCSF Health CEO into seeing climate as an important thing to be working towards, or climate, initiatives as important, because especially in lieu of what you're talking about, the power plant up on Parnassus campus, and how that's just not on the radar for this CEO. I'm just curious what your strategy will be for that.
Actually, Suresh has been pretty receptive. He was invited to speak at the NorCal Climate Health Symposium with a partnership with Stanford and UC Davis. And he did a really good job of explaining how UCSF and UCSF Health is making this a priority. And we see that in the focus for the construction of the new hospital. So there's definitely interest on his part. it may be that there are things that he's not aware of, because the energy team at UCSF Health is very much engaged in this. They've been working on, I don't know, maybe more than a half a dozen different projects to reduce natural gas usage within the hospital, especially Moffett Law. Mission Bay is actually, pretty new, so may see a lot of the work is in Moffett Law. So I believe he is engaged. It may be that he hasn't talked a lot about it publicly beyond the NorCal symposium, but my discussion with him is there, he does see the value in it. Other questions? All right, well, I guess we can move on to Ariane.
Thanks,
Are you
Gail.
ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
If you want to take down,
Yes, let me do that right. Hold on. There we go. Okay.
So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. And to Gail for inviting me to give this talk with her. In July of 2021, we launched the University of California Center for Climate Health and Equity, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to share more about the center with you. We just completed over our first year of work. We do see the center as a key force in activating the health sector in climate action for a healthier and more equitable work. What I will cover with you today is the mission and vision for the center. I will call it CCHE moving forward. It's a lot of words to be able to say it repeatedly. And I'll talk about the key pillars, projects, and opportunities for action in the center. Leaving on a similar note, I got muted. Can you hear me?
You're good.
Okay, great. The mission and the mission of the center is to harness the expertise and leadership of the health sector to drive ambitious climate action for health and health action for the climate. Our vision is to advance equitable and just climate solutions that promote human health and a healthy planet. And we do this across 4 pillars of work, which I'll talk a little bit more about each pillar: research, education, health systems, and policy. The home for the center is UCSF, and it brings together faculty and staff and students from all 10 campuses and 5 healthcare systems to really think about healthy climate solutions. We have over 100 faculty affiliates, which lead education, research, and solutions on all aspects of climate and health. Our approach focuses on leveraging the expertise, resources, and innovations within the University of California system, for which there is an elaborate amount of expertise and innovation. Collaboration across civil society and government sectors to amplify synergies, centering community perspectives and needs throughout an equity and justice lens that we really weave through all of our pillars and our work, and implementing a needs-driven and policy-responsive agenda that yields rapid and tangible benefits for California public and beyond. I'm going to briefly cover what we've been doing in each of our pillars and also what we're planning for the coming year. In research, our focus has been really on transdisciplinary scholarship that fills key evidence gaps and is responsive to policy priorities, engaging the most affected communities. As a snapshot of our 2022 accomplishments, we launched a UC-wide seed grant program. We had about 50 letters of intent from all 10 campuses. We awarded 2 faculty proposals and 2 student proposals that were funded June of 22 through June of 23. We're really excited to see what these projects hold. Some of the topics that these projects focused on were climate resilience among vulnerable communities in Fresno, education strategies that teach resilience practices that come from Indigenous communities and ways of knowing, intervention health outcomes related to wildfire air pollution and extreme heat in California, and then urban forest equity in Los Angeles, which is replicable to other parts of California for the participant who actually asked about green spaces. I'm happy to talk about this more. In the upcoming year, we're working on a climate and health equity dashboard for California, which we're hoping will be able to be accessed by UC faculty, students, and staff, as well as external partners. And the goal is really to be able to generate high impact policy relevant publications that are usable to policymakers and health system leaders about really how climate events are affecting health in California. This year, we're also going to be launching a community action research partnership in 2 California regions to identify and pilot equity-driven solutions that address priorities concerning climate and health threats that communities face. Our grants are going to support these projects, targeting a specific implementation or policy issue that's prioritized by a community partner. Our second strategic pillar is education. We are focusing on building an education hub that's preparing the 21st century health workforce and the public to understand and act on climate and health. We are working on developing curricula, training, enhanced professional development opportunities to instill a climate health habit of mind to address climate health challenges. We also are starting a pipeline of climate and health pathways for K through 12, including training our kindergarten through 12th grade teachers to address climate anxiety among young students. This year, we launched a patient care toolbox related to the health impacts of wildfires, which is now housed on our online hub. The materials are available and they talk about the general health risks associated with wildfires, as well as specific lung, heart, and skin health, pregnancy, mental health, and children's health. And we have translations of those materials in Spanish and Mandarin as well. We held a series of colloquia this year and launched a climate and health justice course. We expanded the Planetary Health Report Card. For those of you who are not familiar with that initiative, it's a completely student-driven initiative. It's a metric-based tool for evaluating and improving planetary health content in health professional schools across the UC system. We are also going to be launching a decarbonization fellowship this year. It's going to be the first of its kind in the country, which will support and mentor faculty-led decarbonization projects in UCSF departments and health systems. That will be something that we will be working very closely with. And I'll talk a little bit about Seema Gandhi's work, but Gail as well. And so the one project that I will talk a little bit more about, which is the one that Gail alluded to, is the Interviews Without Harm project, which we co-sponsored this year with the initiative, which seeks to reduce carbon emissions during the process of application to medical school residency and fellowship. And I'll come back to that in just a second in more detail. Within our health system, this is a pillar that works in parallel to the incredible amount of work that you've seen Gail and her office work on. We are focusing on the carbon neutral, carbon resilient health sector that is responsive to climate health needs by building green health systems, developing climate sensitive patient care, ensuring public health and community health infrastructure is prepared for acute and long-term climate threats, and really strengthening community resilience, particularly for those communities that are in the cities in which our institutions exist. This year, we're working with San Francisco DPH to develop a climate emergency response team that will really be that sort of response mechanism. As I mentioned, Seema Gandhi, who's in the Department of Anesthesiology, who leads our health systems pillar, has spearheaded critical work across the UC system to reduce emissions in clinical practices. Her team has impressively eliminated dysfluorine gas from UCSF and has plans to decrease nitrous oxide by 70 to 90%. This will generate major cost savings, decrease greenhouse gas emissions, along with other exciting decarbonization initiatives her team is working with UC Health and across the UC system. We also launched a green radiology program that focuses on research, education, and health systems to reduce the carbon footprint of imaging, including changing clinical practice guidelines to incorporate energy use into considerations. And finally, in our policy pillar, we've been working with partners to really focus on that translation of evidence to action, educate policymakers, and empower health professionals and communities to act in order to maximize health and equity in climate policy. We had a wonderful meeting with Admiral Rachel Levine earlier this year, focusing on ensuring that climate and health and the UC system is up front and center in federal dialogues. We hosted a policy webinar for the public, but also the academic communities about the new laws around oil and gas setback infrastructure in California and what that meant for community health. We are working on mapping the health equity focused climate plans across California to see the extent to which health is integrated into all climate policy. We're focusing on a stakeholder interview process with policymakers and community organizations to identify barriers and facilitators to integrate health into climate policies. And what we're hoping this will do is form the foundation of a policy dashboard, which will feature promising planning and policy strategies that can serve as best practice resources for researchers and policymakers on how to really integrate health and health equity into the climate policy process. Coming up in this year also, towards the end of 2023, I keep saying this year, but I really actually mean next year. We're going to be hosting a series of 3 regional workshops in Central, Southern, and Northern California to help identify regional and community priorities on climate change and health. These workshops will bring together UC researchers, Department of Health and Human Services, our public health agencies, policymakers, and community organizations to really create a series of recommendations for climate and health for the state to focus on into the next 5 years. In addition to our 4 pillars, we have launched a climate change and mental health council. It is led by Alyssa Apple, the Department of Psychiatry, and it really spans all 4 pillars. That's why we do pull it out. The impact on mental health is significant among adults, but among children in particular. And so the audience here is very apt for this. The council seeks to address mental health consequences of the climate crisis and apply climate research and knowledge to transform mental health care. In the upcoming year, the council will be launching a new UC-wide course focused on eco-anxiety and climate distress. That'll support the mental health needs of students by training them to move from climate health distress to community-based climate action. Here are the examples of the events that I spoke about that we launched this year. The one event that I was a really fun and incredible success that I haven't talked about is the interprofessional education session that we held between UCSF and UC Davis on climate change and health, which really spoke about exactly what Gail alluded to, really, which is the how can health professionals across all the various professions come together to think about how they incorporate climate equity and health into their day-to-day practice. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to highlight a few projects, particularly in policy and education, that I think have important implications for the work that you are doing at the General, but also really provide some ways forward, tangible ways forward, I hope, in thinking about the work each of you are doing. The first project I want to talk about, part of the center, was the Climate and Health Faculty Development Initiative. Faculty in the health profession schools with expertise in climate and health are needed to ensure this education can happen, but the current landscape assessment shows that expertise in climate and health is lacking among faculty. In a recent research project by Denver and colleagues, she identified that most physicians feel that conversations about the health impacts of climate change should become part of clinical encounters, primarily to help patients protect their health. but it was also highlighted that physicians note that they need the knowledge and skills on how to be able to make patient care conversations about this topic relevant and actionable. Building on this, in the center, we implemented the Climate and Health Faculty Development Initiative. Our goals were to educate, engage, support, and inspire health science faculty members to infuse climate and health into their ongoing teaching, transform courses, and ultimately the education of learners. We used the train the trainer model to train 10 faculty leads and 96 faculty across 6 UC health science campuses to integrate climate change and health into their existing courses. Overall, we learned that 99 courses were transformed and over 7,000 students were reached across all the health sciences, including medicine, veterinary medicine, nursing, pharmacy, and dentistry. And while we focus on a university system-wide effort, the model that we put together has broad applicability and is transferable across institutions and departments, and we're happy to share what we put into place for others to use. I do also want to draw attention to a very neat effort that was launched by 2 of our faculty members, Catherine Gundling and Robin Cooper, which focuses on educating the community about climate and health and equity issues. The UCSF Osher Mini Medical School for the Public gives members of the community the opportunity to see and hear what goes on in everyday UCSF classrooms and research labs and lectures from UCSF faculty. We rolled out a series of 6 topics, which included the health emergency of our changing climate, climate action in the era of COVID. And then finally, coming back to the project that both Gail and I alluded to, the Interview Without Harm Coalition, an initiative, represents a group of passionate medical students, residents, and faculty who envision a sustainable, equitable, and efficient process for interviewing medical trainees. This campaign was built on a similar one that was launched in Canada last year, and provides an opportunity for students, faculty, and residency program directors to see how much greenhouse gases they are emitting or not while traveling for interviews, and centers the consideration of the environmental impact into ongoing practices of medical education that have often been taken for granted by us. The initiative joins evolving conversations on the forced restriction of medical training interviews that was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, underscoring how the professions have not prioritized environmental impact despite sizable historical emissions generated by interview-related travel, and the incompatibility that we see between ecological damage and population health. Beyond environmental impact, this initiative also hones in on how virtual interviews are more equitable with significantly fewer financial cost and are more efficient, requiring less time off of work and school. The initiative really focuses on addressing the concerns that are associated with virtual interviews, including interview inflation, limited applicant exposure to programs, and other surrounding areas, and speaks about how that can be addressed via creative and structural solutions, such as interview caps and in-person second look programs. The initiative really presents a strategic inflection point for medical education leadership to build on the momentum and permanently transform the process by focusing on sustainability and equity. I just want to quickly begin to close out by noting who our key partners are in this process. We really are working very closely with the Office of the President, in particular UC Health and the UC Sustainability Offices and the Global Climate Leadership Council. And we have a lot of established relationships that you see throughout all of the sectors here. We are starting our new class of UC CCHE Fellows in 2023, which you see are primarily students working in this area and come from almost all the UC schools. Here are our campus leads across all 10 of our campuses, including UCSF Fresno, and our policy and pillar initiative leads. As I close out, there are two quick things I want to leave you with as you think about where you would want to be involved in addressing this existential crisis we are facing. I want to leave you with an understanding of a few key terms. As we think about our work, where we work, and how we work, three concepts are really core in our day-to-day. First is really environmental identity, is one part of the way in which people think about their self-concept, a sense of connection to some part of the natural environment based on history, emotional attachment, and or similarity that affects the ways in which we perceive and act towards the world. A belief that the environment is important, part of us and who we want to be, and really thinking about our collective identity and addressing that. Second, I want to underscore this notion of environmental accountability. We want our health science institutions to provide an education that prepares our learners for this idea of environmental accountability. It really builds on this concept of social accountability, which is the idea that our institutions' education, research, and service activities develop, promote, and protect environmentally sustainable solutions to address the health concerns of the communities they serve. Environmentally accountable institution is one which has clear, effective policies to reduce the school's environmental impact through education, through research, to ensure that the health systems are sustainable for future generations. And it really includes linking awareness and responsiveness to challenges with clear evidence-based action plans, working with our local communities, and really helping reduce the environmental impact where we can. And finally, really focusing on what it means to be an eco-ethical medical education leader or medical leader. This idea of eco-ethical leadership really follows certain values and beliefs. So this moral duty to act in terms of taking responsibility and stewardship for the planet and its resources, showing a commitment to environmental and organizational community sustainability and regeneration, making sure that we are role modeling environmentally sustainable practices, are accountable for our actions, and really are of the opinion that collective intelligence is the most powerful way to engender meaningful change. And I want to leave you with a way to think about how each and every one of us can answer this never-ending question of what can I do or what should I do in this important climate crisis dialogue. Dr. Ayana Johnson is a marine biologist and a founder of the non-for-profit think tank lab, the Urban Ocean Lab, and she's also the co-founder of the All We Can Save project. And she raises awareness that makes a powerful case for nurturing a welcoming, connected, and leader-led climate community rooted in the work and wisdom of women and justice, and focuses on the planet and saving it. We take her framing and the goal of this diagram, which is to begin to foster dialogue that connects and inspires you as healthcare professionals to identify your purpose and the actions to take in the work that you do towards this purpose. Thinking about each of these three concentric circles that you see coming together, she pushes us to really think about what are you good at? So what is your specific skill and your magic? Thinking about what are the gifts that you bring to your professional arena. And then really what brings you joy? What wakes you up in the morning? This is very important because neglecting joy will lead to burnout. And then what is the work that we finally think needs doing in healthcare? What are the climate and justice solutions that you can work toward in the area that you work in? And as you take a moment to think about each of these circles and the intersection of the three, that will really point you to the center of the circle, which is what you should do. How might you focus your efforts and actions? And what, if anything, could you change about your current approach or what you're doing, or thread into what you're doing to bring about change? So I would like to leave you with this graphic and close out by thanking you on behalf of the Core Center and Gail for giving me the opportunity to speak with her, and to all of you for having us here. If you want to reach us, here are for opportunities for involvement. Here is how you can. Oh, and we had a launch event in May of 2021, which focused on a couple of key contemporary policy dialogues in climate and health. I'll send this particular PowerPoint along, but if you wanted to spend some time listening to contemporary conversations on climate and health by experts across the world, we welcome you to listen in to those. I'm going to stop sharing and happy to take questions.
Thank you all so much. We have about 5 minutes for questions if anyone wants to raise their hand.
I see Naomi.
Hi. Oh,
Sorry. I don't know which order to go in. I see Naomi's hands raised, but I also saw somebody else speak. So
The other person,
ahead,
go
Naomi.
ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, this is Maddie again. Just wanted to thank you both for everything you ran through and your transparency about the shortcomings of some of the things that you're working on. I also was just wondering, we were just chatting as a group, it seemed like the compost and recycling got taken out of the Mission Bay waste stream this summer. I don't know if that's already, I haven't been there for a month, so it may be changed now, but I was just curious about what's going on with the waste stream side of things.
Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I think I have to unmute. Yeah, I have to unmute on my phone. Okay, so what happened this past year was we've been focusing on waste training because we've been getting fined by the city because we were not complying with the requirements to sort our waste properly, and they kept getting, all of our waste streams were getting contaminated with other waste products. So we had to pull back and say, let's just focus on getting everything right with the solid waste, pulling all the recycling out of the solid waste and making sure that whatever went into the solid waste landfill was correct. And so they did remove a lot of the containers in some of the areas because they weren't being sorted properly anyway. And it was a way to try to focus more on what needed to go into the landfill waste over and above whatever else would happen. And then now that they've drilled down on that and they're really focusing on that training, then they can start gradually bringing back some of the other containers. So they, hopefully if certain areas start to sort their waste a little bit better, then they'll be getting new containers.
Thank you.
Oh, can I mention one more thing about waste? Just so you know, the whole proliferation of single-use throwaway products, we didn't really recognize that is, most of those products are made from fossil fuels. So we are actually driving the market for more fossil fuel made products with all of the single-use disposables that we've been buying and using. So we're really encouraging the reuse of all medical supplies, if it's possible, that they could be cleaned and sterilized and returned back into use over and above single-use disposables in almost every case. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that, because there is a general trend toward more disposables in a lot of cases.
Naomi, you had your hand up as well.
Thanks so much. Yeah, such great presentations and so, very informative and I think helpful for all of us to hear about the work that's being done and how we can get involved. My general sort of thinking about climate change and our role as healthcare professionals, it feels like what people are talking about. I went to a California Medical Association presentation a couple weeks ago, and then also these presentations. I think about in probably 3 different buckets. One bucket is sort of epidemiology and describing the inequities and the impact of climate change and differentially across populations. That's something that that's a hat we wear as medical professionals and researchers. Then there's the thought of how do we counsel patients? And this is where a lot of emphasis is in healthcare conversations right now around climate change, is how do we counsel patients to be climate change resilient, so deal with heat, wildfires, smoke, etc. And then there's another piece of that, which is how do we help create resiliency within the most impacted communities, which I think is also really important work that we're doing. And then there's another bucket though that I feel like, oh, and sorry, there's one other bucket and then the last bucket. Then there's another bucket, which is like, we have to take care of what's going on in our backyard. We got to clean ourselves up as much as we can, which is, Gail, all the stuff that you're talking about. And I think is super appropriate. And you know, we know that healthcare sector is like 10% is my understanding of emissions. So that's like definitely something we have control over. But the last part is like, fossil fuel industries and advocacy to try and actually address the really big picture stuff that like is not directly healthcare related. It's not stuff that we do in our normal everyday practice, whether it's research or counseling patients or our own operations, but is also potentially an extremely important part of what we as doctors can do. So like there's a terrible article that just came out this past week about because of the inflation and because of the war in Ukraine and Russia, there's like the fossil fuel industry had like $9 billion of windfall from that, right? And there's a huge amount of taxing that could happen. They're not paying a ton of money, like the proportion that goes back into climate solutions of that money is like minuscule, right? And so the amount of advocacy that we might be able to have as doctors and a doctoring voice is another piece that I feel like oftentimes in our healthcare conversations, we don't talk about that piece, but it's probably the biggest impact we can make. So what do you guys think about that? And like, how does that enter into the thinking right now?
A huge, huge part of the dialogue. Thank you so much for laying out those buckets, because I think that's such a wonderful way to see and think about it. And just to underscore that last piece, the fossil fuel industry and the healthcare professionals' role in that dialogue is very, very critical. And I think that's really also what Gail was talking about earlier when she was highlighting advocacy. I do want to quickly say, because I know we're right at 9, one of our launch event plenaries was focused exactly on that topic. We brought in folks who have been working at the intersection of healthcare and trying to really push forward this idea that health professionals play a key role in the fossil fuel pushback dialogue and what it means to human health. The link has it, and I really recommend you hear from it. It's a panel of incredible people who've been working at this intersection for years.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much. I'm so glad that we got to have both of you here. I know it's 9 o'clock, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time, but thank you again to you both.
Right. Thanks for inviting us.